For those who knew her only on the surface, 45-year-old Lauren Stewart appeared to lead a life of perfection. A dedicated wife to Dan, a loving mother to her adult children, Stephen and Bethany, it seemed as though fate had truly smiled upon her. Weeks before her unthinkable act, she delved into a dark world, exploring haunting paths on YouTube, delving into methods of ending her own life, and mastering the use of a Glock handgun. This is the enigmatic tale of Lauren Stewart. Lauren Divine Stewart was born on January 9, 1973. She spent most of her life in Michigan, and her work history included part-time personal training at YMCA in Farmington Hills and occasional house cleaning. After leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, she had pursued modeling and acting, exploring her creative side through workshops and networking with photographers. She was regarded as a charming and very pleasant woman. According to one of her profiles on the internet, she wrote, "I love acting and modeling. I'm a very passionate person and it reflects my work. I'm adventurous in nature, and so I like a wide variety of acting and modeling experiences. I enjoy learning new things, especially with good direction. Sharing relative ideas, new and old, intrigues me. Life is an adventure, and my goal is to die knowing I did the things I wanted to do." Lauren was married to a man named Daniel Stewart. Dan worked at the University of Michigan. At the forefront of technological innovation, he served as a lead software architect, dedicated to developing technology for predicting heart attacks. He worked in the technology industry for many years as a coder developer. Together with his wife, they remained devout Christians within the Jehovah's Witness denomination for an extended period, until 2013 when they decided to explore and take a different approach to their spiritual life. The couple had two accomplished children, 27-year-old Stephen and 24-year-old Bethany. A data solution architect and a computer whiz, Stephen, like his father, shared a passion for technology, while Bethany showcased her talents in art and graphic design. At 45, Lauren Stewart had it all: a flourishing husband, two college-educated children, a budding modeling career, and a charming Kego Harbor home adorned with a welcoming heart wreath on the door. But behind this facade of perfection lurked a hidden pain. Lauren grappled with the heartache of exclusion and rejection from the religion she and Daniel were born into. Just a few years back, Lauren and her husband chose to break away from the Jehovah's Witness faith, a Christian denomination notorious for its strict indoctrination and the practice of shunning former members. The idyllic exterior masked a complex web of emotions and choices that would soon unravel into a gripping narrative. You see, up until 2013, Lauren and her family had been devout Jehovah's Witnesses, strictly adhering to beliefs that shunned celebrations like birthdays, Easter, Christmas, or any other event they believed went against the teachings of Christ. In addition, their faith strongly discouraged higher education, putting Stephen and Bethany at risk of being excommunicated if they pursued college in the future. Dan, however, envisioned a brighter future for their children through higher education. When they sought approval from the church elders to let their kids pursue degrees, the response was resolute: disobey the church's policies and face disfellowship. This threat weighed heavily on the Stuarts, as almost everyone they knew, including their extended family, were part of the congregation, and according to the church's rules, excommunication would mean complete isolation, even from their own flesh and blood. After careful consideration, the Stuarts made a bold decision to leave the religion they had long embraced. Although it initially felt right, the community's disapproval became unbearable, especially for Lauren. She described how simple tasks like grocery shopping were marred by dirty looks and hurtful comments from once-believed friends. Even though the belittling remarks were not spoken directly to her, they were intentionally made within earshot. Residing in a small community of just 3,300 residents, many of whom were Jehovah's Witnesses, the Stuarts grappled with the reality that the members in good terms with the church would consistently remind them of their outcast status whenever the opportunity presented itself. This emotional burden took its toll, leading to a breaking point. In search of a lifeline, Lauren turned to the gym, making it a regular part of her life to rebuild her physical well-being. Her transformation was so remarkable that she secured a job as a fitness instructor, leveraging her natural beauty to become a model with surprising success. To those who crossed her path during this time, Lauren appeared pleasant, exuding optimism despite her church's rejection. Yet beneath her facade of confidence lay a profound and unimaginable suffering. Chronic depression, an affliction she battled even before the shunning, intensified with each passing day. Desperately masking her inner turmoil, she would occasionally reveal cracks in her facade, quickly concealing them with a fake smile. One of Lauren's most guarded secrets was the family's crippling debt, pushing them to the edge of ruin. Faced with a dual onslaught of financial and emotional distress, she devised a plan to resolve all her problems at once. Haunted by her inner demons, Lauren Stewart's descent into darkness was both chilling and heartbreaking. She delved into grim research, scouring YouTube for methods of ending her own life and instructional videos on handling a handgun, all leading up to a fateful day. On February 15, 2018, she left a poignant note on the dinner table, meticulously tidied the home, and texted her loved ones as well as her husband's boss. Just before the unthinkable act, she turned over all the family photos on a secretary desk. At 9:24 a.m., she sent a message to her husband's boss that said, "Mark, this is Lauren. Dan had an accident this morning and died. I can't talk now. Someone will inform you later on the details at hospital." The boss reached out for further details but got no response. Hours later, at 5:07 p.m. on the same day, she reached out to her cousin confessing she had become evil and said the following words: "I took my husband and kids with me so that they don't have to feel my selfish act. They will sleep until Christ resurrects them. I truly hope you do better where I failed." To which her cousin responded, "Lauren, you are scaring me. What are you saying? Don't do it, Lauren." Lauren had become more and more detached from reality in recent months. Unbeknownst to her family, she had a pistol in her possession and had tragically decided to turn it against the very people she professed to love, one by one. This heartbreaking culmination of her internal torment resulted in a devastating series of acts. Her first victim was her husband, 47-year-old Dan, who unsuspectingly relaxed in their furnished basement. Lauren, armed and determined, used a throw pillow as a makeshift silencer and shot him in the head as he attempted to flee. With her most significant threat eliminated, she ascended the stairs. Upstairs, her 24-year-old daughter, Bethany, who had recently celebrated her birthday, lay asleep in her room. Without hesitation, Lauren positioned herself just feet from the bed, aimed the gun, and ended her daughter's life in an instant. Next, her son Stephen, who had his own place across town, unknowingly arrived at the family home, lured by false pretenses. Oblivious to the imminent danger, he busied himself with the task his mother had prepared. With his back turned, unaware of what was coming, Lauren, the mother he loved, shot him at point-blank range. The horrifying scene didn't end there. Lauren took the life of the family dog, placing its body in the bathtub. A neighbor had heard these shots, but assumed someone was slamming doors. As the house became a chilling temporary morgue, she meticulously tidied up. The darkness culminated as Lauren turned the gun on herself, using a method she had researched online. The cousin who Lauren had texted tried texting her back, but Lauren never responded. The cousin went over to her house the following morning on February 16th with a friend. With no response at the door, they contacted the police for a welfare check. When police arrived at the house the morning of February 16th, the kitchen was organized. The refrigerator was stocked. Handwritten labels were on various items, and a calendar hung on the refrigerator. Their discovery began with the family dog in the bathtub, triggering a chilling response from the officers who feared there was an active shooter. "Get your gun out! There's a dead dog in the tub!" one had yelled to a partner. Climbing a spiral staircase to the second floor, they found Stephen Stewart on the floor, believed to have been shot while seated on a chair. In another room, Bethany lay lifeless, shot in her sleep with a pillow muffling the sound. Gunshots were also noticeable on the pillowcase. Dan Stewart was discovered on the basement floor in front of a couch, his right hand still in his jeans pocket. The slightly pulled white pocket liner on his left pocket suggested he was standing when he was shot and attempted to react, thus pulling the pocket liner. Upstairs, Lauren was discovered at the base of the stairs, a pistol by her side, her self-inflicted wound between the eyes echoing her online research. 2 notes were found on the dinner table. One was for the medical examiner, while the other, a chilling suicide note, exposed Lauren's inner turmoil. I allowed evil into my heart when I chose not to accept God's free love, and it made me sick inside, Lauren wrote. I killed my family because I know my death would stumble them. At least now they will not suffer and will be resurrected to life forever in peace. As the police delved into the Stuarts' world, a complex and perplexing picture began to emerge. Interviews with family members, friends, and neighbors painted the couple as reclusive, marked by a sense of estrangement after leaving the Jehovah's Witness church. Lauren's history was marred by her own struggles. Some family members said Lauren, who had 11 siblings, suffered from depression which was later on compounded by the weight of motherhood. In recent years, she spiraled into religious fixation, often launching impassioned tirades. Her family members, including her father and sister, revealed the extent of the emotional distance that had grown over time and had not spoken to her in years. Her mother had passed away when she was 13 years. Estranged for years, they saw Dan as the catalyst pulling Lauren away from them and never really cared about him. They also shared troubling insights about the couple's mental health, characterizing their relationship as a fusion of mutual distress. To those who knew Lauren, her defiance of the Jehovah's Witness faith marked her as an apostasy, a label that spoke to her outspoken opposition to the organization and her decision to leave it. The heart-wrenching tragedy left a deep scar on the lives of those who knew the family intimately. Joyce Taylor, a longtime family friend, was visibly shaken, believing that the murders were a direct consequence of the Stuarts' rejection by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Taylor and other former members shed light on the harsh reality of leaving the faith. They explained that once you depart from the church, even your own family members who remain within its fold are forbidden from interacting with you, a severe form of shunning that takes a heavy emotional toll. According to Taylor, Lauren and Daniel's desire to provide their children with a college education clashed head-on with the religion's teachings, which frowned upon such pursuits. The collision between their aspirations and the rigid doctrines of their faith set the stage for a tragic unraveling. They were shunned everywhere and every way possible. If Lauren went to the grocery store, they didn't look her in the eye, Taylor said. When you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, they choose your friends. They choose who you associate with, and if you go against that, they will disfellowship you or shun you. In a shocking turn of events, Joyce Taylor stormed into a Kingdom Hall meeting in Union Lake, seizing the moment to confront the congregation. Standing on a chair, she boldly criticized the gathering, her voice resonating with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Excuse me, everyone," she declared. "My name is Joyce Taylor. 2 days ago, 4 people died as a result of your shunning process." Taylor's outburst sent shockwaves through the room as she pushed away congregants and vented her pent-up frustration, shouting, "5 years ago, you people pulled your support from this small family. The only support they had was you people. You turned them away and you shunned them. And for what?" she exclaimed. "Because they wanted to raise their children as they saw fit." The police were aware of the family's issues with their former church, but declined to comment. Police records detailed how Lauren had recorded a poignant 2-minute video on February 6th at 11 p.m., explaining the depth of her despair. She cited a multitude of issues, expressing her inability to carry on and her desire not to burden others any longer. Abandoned by her church family, Lauren found herself drowning in a relentless sea of despair, with what she believed to be the only escape: death. Convinced that ending her own life was the solution to her unbearable suffering, she made the agonizing choice to also take the lives of her loved ones, sparing them what she perceived as the inevitable shame and suffering that her actions would bring upon their household. Police records painted a grim picture of Lauren's mental state in the lead-up to the tragedy, noting her unmistakable signs of severe depression and increasingly abnormal behavior. It appeared that she had immersed herself in a personal interpretation of religion, intensifying her depression. Shockingly, she never sought professional help or counseling, and no prescription drugs or alcohol were found in her system. However, traces of marijuana were discovered, not just in Lauren's system, but also in her husband and sons. The police investigation unraveled a complex web of factors contributing to her devastating actions. Loneliness, the severed ties with family and friends over religious differences, and deep-seated emotional scars stemming from alleged childhood sexual abuse all converged to amplify her anguish, ultimately driving her to commit the unthinkable. In a striking testament to the estrangement within the family, Lauren's sister's response spoke volumes. She exhibited a somber demeanor and expressed a surprising lack of surprise when hearing the news of her sister's actions, demonstrating just how far Lauren had drifted from her own sister, who even showed little regret about the tragedy. While the motives behind Lauren Stewart's horrifying actions may have been due to the profound isolation imposed by her former church and her childhood trauma, it begs the question: could things have taken a different turn had she reached out for help when she felt suffocated by her circumstances? Tragically, rather than seeking counseling or professional guidance, Lauren chose a path of self-destruction with devastating consequences for all involved. As we reflect on this heart-wrenching tale, our thoughts are with the victims whose lives were tragically cut short and the loved ones they left behind. In the charming streets of Macon, Georgia, the life of a promising young law student took a dark turn, unveiling a mystery that would grip the community. This is the story of Lauren Teresa Giddings, a narrative that began with dreams of a successful legal career but ended in a chilling tale of crime, deception, and tragedy. Lauren, a bright and ambitious law student, was on the verge of realizing her aspirations. However, the tranquil facade of her neighborhood held secrets that would unfold in a way that no one could have anticipated. Lauren Teresa Giddings was born on April 18, 1984, in Tacoma Park, Maryland, to William Bill and Karen Payne Giddings. Growing up in Laurel, a suburban community nestled between Washington and Baltimore, she shared her home with her two younger sisters, Caitlin and Sarah. Actively involved in the community, Lauren was a dedicated member of St. Mary of the Mills Catholic Church and completed her early education at St. Mary's School, attending from kindergarten through 8th grade. After graduating from Atholton High School in Columbia in 2002, Lauren left a mark through her participation in field hockey and softball. In pursuit of higher education, she ventured to Macon, Georgia in the same year, enrolling at Agnes Scott College. At Agnes Scott, she majored in political science, minored in religious studies, and enthusiastically participated in softball. Lauren achieved her graduation in 2006, becoming the first in her family to attend college, a source of immense pride for her parents. Caitlin, Lauren's sister, reflected on her transformation, saying, "She really didn't bloom until college. She was loud and fun. She wasn't as much like that in high school." It became evident that Lauren's confidence developed with age, and she was evolving into a brilliant, mature woman poised for a successful career. Following her undergraduate studies, she returned home, initially working for the National Center for Public Policy in Washington, D.C. Subsequently, she decided to venture into law. In 2008, Lauren embarked on her legal education at Mercer University's Walter F. George School of Law, where she took on the role of president of the Federalist Society. On May 14, 2011, she achieved her Juris Doctorate degree. Lauren aspired to be a public defender, driven by the desire to assist others. With her signature blonde hair and penchant for wearing pink, Lauren adored animals, particularly her cherished Pekingese dog named Butterbean, who was always by her side. Renowned for her popularity and kindness, friends and family recalled how Lauren consistently went out of her way to befriend social outcasts, possessing the unique ability to see the good in everyone. Perhaps it was this virtue that unfortunately made her the target of an incredibly heinous crime. In June 2011, Lauren found herself eagerly anticipating the future. At 27 years old, she reached a significant milestone by graduating from Mercer University in Georgia after 7 arduous years dedicated to the study of law. The journey had been marked by prolonged stress and intense exhaustion, but Lauren's unwavering determination to become a criminal lawyer fueled her commitment to see it through. With the finish line nearly in sight, there remained one last hurdle: the bar exam. Like many students, Lauren opted to stay in Macon after graduation instead of returning home to Baltimore. Her chosen residence was conveniently located just across from Mercer University, allowing her to immerse herself completely in her studies, free from any potential interruptions. Having recently graduated from law school, Lauren and her friends decided to indulge in one last night of celebration before diving into their bar exam preparations. On the Friday night of June 24, 2011, they gathered at a local bar for a joyous evening. Lauren opted to spend the night at her friend Ashley's house, joining other members of their friend group. During the night, Lauren shared with her friends her unsettling suspicion that she had a stalker. She recounted instances of returning home to find things in her apartment rearranged, a concern she had previously mentioned a year earlier to her sister. On a separate occasion, a friend had informed her of seeing someone spying on her through her window, equipped with a large stick topped with a camera aimed at her second-floor apartment. In an email sent to her boyfriend, David Vandiver, on the night before her tragic demise, Lauren expressed her fear that someone was breaking into her apartment. However, she reassured him that she would be moving out that week and was determined to endure the situation until then. In the same email, she conveyed her feelings of hopefulness and excitement about the future. During the night of celebration, Joe, Lauren's ex-boyfriend and a roommate of Ashley's, was in attendance. Lauren ultimately spent the night in Joe's room, but the details of what occurred behind the closed door remain unknown. The following morning, after the festivities, Lauren left Ashley's house. Although her friends didn't witness her departure, Joe claimed to have seen her leave. Regrettably, that marked the final instance her friends saw or heard from her. In the days following the celebration, a disconcerting silence surrounded Lauren as no one heard from her. Given her close ties with her family and regular communication, they initially attributed her absence to her prior warning that she would be immersed in studying for the bar exam and likely unavailable for the next few weeks. Lauren had even taken the step of leaving her beloved dog Butterbean at her parents' house to eliminate distractions and wholly concentrate on exam preparations. Consequently, her family wasn't overly alarmed when days passed without any communication from Lauren. However, as several days lapsed with continued silence, Lauren's sister grew increasingly concerned. Recalling the last text exchange on the night of the celebrations, her sister realized days later that Lauren had never responded, intensifying the sense of unease and prompting them to delve deeper into the mystery surrounding her sudden disappearance. On June 30th, 2011, Lauren's friend Ashley, growing increasingly worried as she hadn't received any responses to her texts over the past few days, took the initiative to check on Lauren. She went to Lauren's apartment and knocked on the door, but received no answer. Concern deepened when calls to Lauren's mobile phone went unanswered, a departure from her usual studious and focused routine at Ashley's house. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Ashley contacted Lauren's sister, Caitlin, to inquire if Lauren might be at her parents' house. To everyone's surprise and alarm, Lauren had never made it to her parents' home. Armed with a spare key to Lauren's apartment, Ashley, accompanied by a few friends, entered the residence. At this point, 4 days had passed without any communication from Lauren. Compounding the concern was the fact that Lauren was scheduled to move to her boyfriend David's place an hour away the next day. Upon entering the apartment, they discovered signs that Lauren had started packing but hadn't completed the task. Her phone, keys, and other personal belongings were left behind, and her car remained parked outside. Ashley and her friends waited for Lauren's return, but to their dismay, she did not reappear. The mysterious circumstances surrounding her absence deepened the sense of unease and raised more questions than answers. Upon discovering Lauren's unsettling disappearance, Ashley promptly contacted Lauren's family to convey the distressing news. Lauren's father, fueled by concern, embarked on an 11-hour drive to his daughter's apartment in a desperate attempt to locate her. Simultaneously, the police were notified, and Lauren's case transitioned into a missing person investigation. Given the circumstances, David, her boyfriend, and Joe, her ex-boyfriend, drew immediate scrutiny as potential suspects, particularly since Joe was the last person known to have seen her. Despite Joe's cooperative stance and assertion that Lauren left early for a pool visit, suspicions lingered. The police delved into Lauren's credit card statements, uncovering an entry fee for a pool at a country club that morning, as well as a receipt from a fast food restaurant later that Saturday night. The investigation took a distressing turn when police examined Lauren's computer and discovered an email she had sent to David. In the email, she expressed her anxiety, believing that someone had attempted to break into her apartment the night before while she was away, an ominous revelation that heightened concerns about her well-being. Upon entering Lauren's apartment, the police encountered an absence of signs indicating a struggle or forced entry, and no items were reported stolen or missing. Despite these initial observations, a sense of foreboding prompted the police to escalate their investigation. Seeking potential evidence, a crime lab tech team was brought in to utilize luminol within the apartment, hoping to detect traces of blood. The critical breakthrough occurred in Lauren's bathroom, where the luminol reacted vividly. The substance illuminated the space like a Christmas tree, revealing blood splatters covering the bathtub, smeared across the floor, and sprayed up the walls. This distressing revelation left the police with a chilling realization. Their search was no longer for a missing person, but for a potential crime scene involving a body. While at the location, detectives were struck by an unpleasant odor, prompting one of them to remark, "While we were standing there, the wind started to turn. Immediately, I smelled an odor that I was familiar with. We all smell things in life that smell bad, and that of a body, or a decomposing body, is one of the worst things you'll smell. But it has a very distinctive smell." Following the unmistakable smell of death, the detectives traced it to a sizable barrel containing 2 trash bags. The first bag contained only refuse, offering no breakthrough. However, the second bag held a gruesome discovery, the torso of a white female. The body, wrapped in plastic, had been dismembered, with the head, legs, and arms missing. Faced with this horrifying scene, the police opted not to immediately inform the family, as they hadn't conclusively identified the remains as belonging to Lauren Giddings. Unfortunately, news of the torso's discovery leaked to a media outlet, sparking widespread awareness. Subsequent DNA analysis later confirmed the tragic truth. The body indeed belonged to the law student, Lauren Giddings. The brutal murder of a cherished member of the Mercer Law School community was shocking in itself. However, as friends began to share their accounts, a disconcerting pattern emerged. Recollections surfaced, revealing that Lauren had, with a sense of unease, hinted at being stalked over the past year. In conversations with friends, she confided in the unsettling belief that someone was covertly observing her in her apartment, going so far as to rearrange things when she was away. These revelations added an alarming layer to the tragedy, underscoring the distress Lauren had experienced leading up to the heinous crime. As news spread that most of Lauren's body had been discovered, a wave of panic swept through the community, amplifying concerns that a potential killer was in the vicinity. Reporters descended upon the apartment complex, seeking interviews and adding to the growing unease. Responding to the escalating situation, the police expanded their initial search from the immediate neighborhood to a radius of 10 blocks around the apartments, hoping to uncover crucial clues to solve the homicide. Over the following week, the search extended to various locations, including in and around the apartments, along the Okmulgee River, at Macon's landfill, and in drains and sewers near the crime scene, all in a desperate attempt to locate the missing body parts. With 16 apartments in the block where Lauren resided, news stations swarmed the crime scene, eager to gather information. Among those interviewed was Stephen McDaniel, Lauren's next-door neighbor and fellow law student. Though perceived as somewhat eccentric, Stephen appeared genuinely concerned for his neighbor and classmate during the interviews. During a field interview, a reporter questioned Stephen about his reaction to the discovery of a body in the area, and his response was nothing short of peculiar. Upon hearing the word body, Stephen entered a disoriented state, repeating the word while blinking and staring off into space. Concerned by his unusual reaction, the police decided to bring him in for questioning. Throughout the interrogation, Stephen remained dissociated for a considerable period. When the police requested to inspect his apartment, Stephen consented. During the search, they uncovered a stack of condoms in his dresser, a discovery that contradicted his previous claim to investigators that he was a virgin saving himself for marriage. In response, Stephen asserted that he had stolen the condoms from various apartments he had burglarized. Consequently, the police detained him on burglary charges. Further investigations revealed that Stephen possessed a master key to all the apartments in the complex, including one for Lauren's residence. In a startling turn, the police discovered a hacksaw in the maintenance room with traces of Lauren's blood on it. The maintenance man, when interrogated, claimed no knowledge of the saw. Subsequently, the police found the hacksaw's packaging in Stephen's apartment, leading them to suspect that, with his master key, he had planted the hacksaw in the maintenance room. In addition to the alarming discoveries, the police stumbled upon a pair of panties belonging to Lauren during their search of Stephen's apartment. Further intensifying the evidence against him, they uncovered numerous disturbing internet blog posts written by Stephen, detailing themes of torture and violence towards women. To compound matters, a flash drive was found containing explicit child pornography. The investigation revealed that Stephen possessed a trove of Lauren's photos on the flash drive, coupled with evidence suggesting he frequently visited her social media pages. His search history depicted a disturbing pattern, wherein he engaged in viewing violent pornography while simultaneously perusing Lauren's pictures on social media. The extent of his obsession became clearer when the police managed to recover deleted footage secretly filmed by Stephen, capturing moments of Lauren's life from an external vantage point. The sheer volume of evidence surpassed 200 pieces, collectively painting a vivid picture that pointed towards Stephen McDaniel as the likely perpetrator of Lauren's murder. It became evident that he had been persistently stalking Lauren for an extended period, amassing numerous images taken without her knowledge,
video footage from inside her apartment, and indications of obsessive scrutiny of her Facebook and LinkedIn pages. While Lauren had maintained a friendly relationship with Stephen, it became apparent that he harbored an intense obsession with her, even though her feelings towards him were not reciprocated. There was a moment when Stephen gathered the courage to ask Lauren out on a date, only to face a polite refusal from her. Unbeknownst to Lauren, suspicions lingered in her mind about activities occurring in her apartment, unaware that Stephen played a role in the unsettling events unfolding around her. Upon his arrest, Stephen McDaniel was brought in for questioning at the police station. However, upon arrival, he appeared to be a mere semblance of the man who had engaged with the news anchor. Throughout more than 2 hours of interrogation, he remained in a trance-like state, offering minimal responses and consistently denying any involvement. While some suspected this behavior to be an act, others pondered the possibility of him experiencing a mental breakdown. The fortuitous delay in the garbage collection that morning was the sole reason Lauren's body had not been discarded with the trash. During his interview, Stephen, seemingly unaware of this delay, mistakenly believed that Lauren's body had already been disposed of, alleviating the urgency of the situation in his mind. In August, a mere month after the discovery of Lauren Giddings' remains, Stephen McDaniel faced first-degree murder charges. Despite maintaining his innocence for several months, he eventually altered his plea from not guilty to guilty, recognizing the overwhelming evidence against him. During the trial, Stephen attempted to mount his defense, asserting that his rights were violated during his arrest. Drawing on his legal education, he accused the police of employing improper interrogation techniques and intimidation, and claimed to have been denied adequate medical care while asserting that he was insulted and yelled at. As part of the plea deal, Stephen agreed to provide the court with a detailed account of the events on the night of Lauren's murder. In exchange for his cooperation, the charges related to child pornography and burglary were slated to be dropped. In his confession, Stephen detailed that on the fateful night, he waited for Lauren to fall asleep before using his master key to enter her home around 4:30 a.m. Once inside, he silently entered her bedroom and stood observing her as she slept. However, an unfortunate creak from a squeaky floorboard startled Lauren awake when he approached her bed. Stephen recounted, "Lauren saw me and said, very calmly, 'Get the f*** out.' He continued to describe how, in response to her resistance, he grabbed her around the throat, leading to both of them tumbling from the bed to the floor.
During the struggle, Lauren's attempt to escape resulted in her legs and lower body becoming wedged under the bed, thwarting her efforts to get away or kick him. Despite Stephen's attempt to present a version of self-defense, the compelling evidence and his admission to the murder were sufficient for both the jury and the judge to render a verdict. Additionally, Stephen disclosed that he had repeatedly asked Lauren out, and each time she rejected his advances due to being in a happy relationship and lacking any romantic interest in him. Unable to cope with the rejection, he began to hatch a sinister plan for the horrific murder. Amid the assault, Stephen had concealed his identity with a mask, but during the struggle, Lauren managed to remove it, revealing his face. Upon recognizing him, she uttered, "Stephen, please stop." Regrettably, her plea went unanswered. Stephen recounted that it took approximately 15 minutes for Lauren to succumb to the attack. After her demise, he dragged her lifeless body into the bathroom, exited her apartment, and returned to his adjoining residence. During the entire day, he occupied himself on the internet before revisiting Lauren's apartment in the evening, armed with a hacksaw. It was then that he proceeded to behead and dismember her. In a chilling disclosure to his lawyer, Stephen admitted to sitting down and meticulously severing each of Lauren's fingers, subsequently flushing them down the toilet. The remaining body parts were placed in black trash bags and dispersed across various dumpsters. Tragically, some of these dumpsters had already been emptied, rendering it impossible to recover Lauren's body. In attempting to discern the motive behind the attack, it became evident that Lauren was scheduled to relocate from her apartment the following day. This impending move meant that Stephen would no longer have her presence in his life, an outcome he seemingly could not bear. On April 21, 2012, Stephen McDaniel was convicted and handed a life sentence, with the potential for parole after 30 years. Despite his attempt to appeal the sentence in 2018, the Richmond County Superior Court dismissed his appeal. He is slated to be ineligible for parole until the year 2041. Lauren's untimely end left a profound impact on her family and friends. The pain they carry serves as a somber reminder of the heinous crime that shattered the peace of their community. In the aftermath, the community came together to support one another, to remember Lauren's vibrant spirit, and to advocate for safety and awareness in the face of the unexpected. The Lauren Teresa Giddings story is a powerful testament to the resilience of a community in the face of darkness. May her memory inspire conversations about safety, trust, and the collective responsibility we bear for the well-being of those around us. Starved, tortured, and abused, failed by everyone from the parents to even child services, not shown love or even some pity, not even remorse from the abusers who happened to be his own grandparents. That's what Jeffrey Baldwin went through at his tender age of 5 before his life was cut short. Jeffrey and his older sister had undergone one of the worst inhuman experiences a child would ever live through until Jeffrey couldn't anymore. On the evening of November 30th, 2002, a phone call was made by Jeffrey's grandmother to the emergency services. On rushing to the location, they were met with a disturbing scene of the emaciated, lifeless body of the young boy. His siblings, however, survived to tell the story of what really happened in their grandparents' house. This is the heartbreaking story of Jeffrey Baldwin. Born on January 20th, 1997, in Toronto, Canada, Jeffrey Baldwin was the son of Yvonne Kidman and Richard Baldwin and had 2 older sisters and a younger brother. He was a happy, healthy, and normal child and weighed an average weight for a baby his age. Life was normal as well, however. His parents were usually troubled, and with allegations of abuse and violence being leveled against them, and with them still being teenagers, they were deemed not fit to raise children, leading them to lose the custody of their 4 children by the summer of 1998. With the blessing, or rather the curse, of the Toronto Catholic Children's Aid Society, the children's care and well-being was handed over to the maternal grandparents, that is, Elva Bottineau and Norman Kidman, where life drastically changed, going from bad to the worst, especially for young Jeffrey and his older sister, who were for some unknown reason singled out as the bad kids. The oldest sister and the youngest brother were however considered the good kids and were treated normally, or if not, close to it. They were made to look down upon them, and were warned by the grandparents not to talk about the other two to anyone, or even talk to them, or like them, and for that reason, they were terrified to do so. The oldest sister, understanding what was happening, still had pity and felt bad for them. A very energetic boy who loved Superman, who tried flying by jumping on and off chairs like every other kid his age did, was always joyful and loved being adventurous. One would never imagine that all that in one day was to be taken away from him. At that time, children were placed with immediate family members if the parents were not able to take care of them, so that the children could stay together and wouldn't have to be placed in group homes or under foster care. If a member of the children's extended family were able to take them, such as in this case the grandparents, it was seen as the most suitable solution. Elva, being a caregiver, was seen even better as they believed that this was the right place for the children. Despite the 3-bedroomed household having 6 adults, that is the grandparents, their 2 daughters, Yvette and Tammy, and their boyfriends to squeeze in with 6 children, that is the 4 siblings, and their 2 cousins who were the children of Tammy, she would receive extra financial support for taking care of the children. What the child services didn't know, or didn't even try to find out, was that under the care of Norman and Elva, it was never a safe space, but rather a house full of agony. So what really happened behind the closed doors of this house, and what was the dark secrets that Norman and Elva had been covering for years? After Jeffrey's death and the shocking discovery of the state of his body and the conditions of the house, the children in the household were seized by the child services and sent to foster care, with the siblings ending up in a foster home under the care of an experienced foster mother. At first, cautious of their new surroundings, they were tight-lipped and couldn't even maintain eye contact for any length of time. But with time, and once they realized this was actually a safer place than where they were before, small bits of information came out from them revealing the traumatic events that they experienced. The foster mother recounted feeling both shocked and bewildered when they first asked if she had a pig wall and pig room in her house. The word pig apparently was a common phrase that was used to refer Jeffrey and his sister, who had gotten used to it. A photograph in which Jeffrey and his sister were sitting confined at a certain corner showed exactly what the children were describing as the pig wall. It's from there that if and when fed, they ate the leftovers of the meals that the rest of the people in the house had eaten, using a shared bowl which was called the pig bowl. This led to the malnourished state of their body, as they looked very small compared to children of their age, with their bodies having sores all over and developing distended bellies. On the second floor of the house was the bedroom in which Jeffrey and his sister spent every night and most of their days locked in, as if they were criminals. In here, there was no heat as the furnace vents were closed, and it was always dark, as the only window in the room was covered. They were usually not taken to hospital, and Jeffrey, unlike his sister and other siblings, didn't go to school as well. The reasoning behind this by the grandparents was that he was not well toilet trained, and therefore wouldn't be accepted. The sister was, however, threatened not to talk about Jeffrey and what they underwent at school, as the grandparents knew that the Children's Aid would come and seize all the children from them once they found out. They were not allowed to play outside like the other children. They had bright red skin on their legs, which was caused by urine washing down to their feet, as they did not use the bathroom most of the time. The room had an awful stench that could even stick on your clothes when you came out of it, as described by one of the detectives. This was often due to their waste being all over the place, and on squeezing the mattresses that they slept on, urine would come out of them. Elva forced them to help clean up their mess by making them scrub the walls and clean their beds, and if they didn't do it well, they were hit by the mop and told, and I quote, "Hurry up, you pigs!" Norman would hit them with his hand, a slipper, or a newspaper if they misbehaved. The oldest sister described the lickings she witnessed her younger siblings going through, where their grandfather spanked them with a metal spoon. They were lined up and had to remove their clothing and underpants, and when she asked him why they had to do that, she was answered so that they wouldn't bleed on the clothes. They were sometimes let out of the room for what was described as exercise, where they were basically forced to walk around the kitchen, and if they stopped, they were thrown objects at and called names, the likes of pig and other abusive terms. And if you thought that this by far was the most evil level they could reach, well, it gets worse from here. The 2 children were not only deprived of good food, but also water, which reverted them to animal instinct, as on one occasion after their arrival to the new foster home, the girl was found drinking water from the toilet, an occurrence that horrified the foster mother. And when she asked her why she drank from the toilet, she simply answered that that was where she and her brother used to drink water from in the previous house. She explained further that they had to wash themselves and their underwear using the toilet water, and that it was the idea of their grandmother. Another occurrence was when the girl was eating very quickly at the dining table as she had an insatiable appetite. The foster mother heard the youngest one saying that if she puked it, she had to eat it, because at their grandmother's house that's what they did. At school, some of her teachers thought that something was amiss as she would often smell like urine, and during snack times, her insatiable appetite was in display. The teachers, having concerns about the young girl, however, chose not to report anything about the matter. And with the children also afraid to share what they went through, this meant that no one could rescue them. Around the year 2000, one of the workers from the Catholic Children's Aid Society made a short visit to Elva and Norman's household, which had been the first visit in a long time. During the visit, the worker had noticed that there had been a bruise under Jeffrey's eye. Had the worker done their due diligence, the children could have been immediately taken, and young Jeffrey would probably still be alive to this day. The injury had, however, been quickly dismissed as a small accident, and no action was taken to further investigate Jeffrey and his siblings' home life with their grandparents. The oldest sister further revealed that the only time she ever recalled seeing Jeffrey smile was when their parents visited them, a thing that didn't really happen often as one would think. Unlike Yvonne's two sisters and their boyfriends who lived in that house and did nothing to help the children but rather watch them suffer and Jeffrey dying slowly, Richard and Yvonne didn't live there and had limited access to their own kids, which was controlled by the highly manipulative grandmother. A long manipulative plan to take over the care of the children had for years been in play. The moment problems had started arising, the child services were involved as Yvonne and Richard had left one of their children unattended. The child was supposed to stay with the grandparents for only a couple of months as the parents fixed their issues. Long before they knew it, they had already filed for custody 2 months in, and with the help of the Catholic Children's Aid Society, they got it. Elva was secretly recording their phone calls and taking notes of them, all in an effort to prove that they were unfit, eventually getting what she wanted, the children's custody. Question is, though, didn't they notice Jeffrey's physical state during their visits? Well, apparently they did. And on questioning Elva why Jeffrey was smaller, even to the point his younger brother was outgrowing him, and why he hadn't been potty trained yet, she always had an answer for everything, or as I would say, a manipulative excuse for this. She claimed that everyone always thought that Jeffrey would grow up to be short, since there were a lot of short people in the family. She further argued that it was the steroids in the cream that his younger brother used for his eczema condition, which made him grow faster than Jeffrey. Only thing left to do, according to them, was to just trust her word, even after they were banned from entering their room, and also after discovering that it was mostly locked. Oddly enough, they were told by Elva herself that the children were drinking from the toilet, and on asked if this did not make them concerned, this is what they had to say.
Didn't that cause you to be a little bit concerned?
We voice concerns, but then all we get is arguments, and basically, if you don't like the way things look, leave.
The same ultimatum was also given to everyone else in the house who tried to voice their concerns. James Mills, Yvette's boyfriend who lived with them, gave his statement saying he always thought the treatment of Jeffrey and his sister was deplorable as they were treated and lived like dogs, while the other children in the household were treated completely different, even the ones that Elva babysat from outside. He had told her on a number of times to get help for Jeffrey as he tried to protest for him due to Jeffrey's skinny frame that kept on getting worse. However, she declined, insisting that it would ruin her check as those kids were $600 to her every month. In short, all she cared about was the extra money that she received that was intended to help her raise them in a good environment and the best way possible, but instead, it was the other way round. With him not paying the rent of the house, he knew if he further insisted on the matter, he would be kicked out. Trying to talk to his girlfriend so that she could try talking to her parents was in vain, as she too was afraid of raising the issue, and would even spark an argument as she asked him in a rather peculiar way, "What do you want me to do?" James and Jeffrey's oldest sister had shared their memories of the days before Jeffrey passed away. The sister described how the day before he died, that Elva wrapped him in a blanket and set him in front of the TV, but he wasn't able to keep his head up as it kept falling down. Elva, however, brushed it off, assuming he was just being lazy, not knowing what was really happening. James had been watching him the nights before as he crawled up the stairs too weak to even walk on his own, his little pajamas falling off because he had no hips. He knew that his condition was really bad and Jeffrey's life was in deep trouble. As he was playing video games in the next room, he heard coughing and sobbing coming from the locked room where Jeffrey spent his last moments in. Afraid to risk his free stay at the house, he did nothing. And on the evening of November 30th, 2002, Jeffrey succumbed to his poor health conditions, with the cause of death being as a result of septic shock and bacterial pneumonia. However, it was also evident that he had suffered due to prolonged starvation and abuse. The grandmother, as mentioned earlier on in the video, called the medical services, saying that her grandson was not breathing. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics instantly became aware that Jeffrey had been abused. A report was made by a pathologist, Dr. Gregory Wilson, where he stated that his body was covered in bruises, sores and abrasions, and he was starved for a long period of time, that he only weighed 21 pounds or around 9.5 kilograms, which was even less than his weight at his first birthday. Jeffrey had no muscle tone or body fat, and his clothes were always falling off of him because he was so skeletal. Additionally, he had ulcers on his genitals, and a few days before his death, a fecal bacteria had gotten into his bloodstream, causing septic shock that would have made it difficult for him to breathe. Jeffrey had most likely placed his fingers into his mouth, transferring the bacteria into his lungs. A pediatric nutritionist, Dr. Stanley Zlotkin, examined Jeffrey's case and stated that in all his years of research in third world countries at the time, he had never seen a child that was starved and stunted to such an extent. With immediate effect, the children in the household were all seized and placed under foster care by the Catholic Children's Aid Society, where the siblings ended up under the care of the foster mother, as stated earlier. Toronto police were immediately on the case, of course, but it was complicated by the fact that the Catholic Children's Aid Society were involved in the family's collective life, Jeffrey's 3 siblings and 2 young cousins being seized and placed in foster care, and some changes in the homicide squad. It must have seemed to Elva and Norman that nothing much was happening, as they had not yet been arrested and thought they had got away with the murder, and so they got themselves busy. The room where Jeffrey and his sister used to be locked up in was cleaned up and painted. With the new look, no one would have guessed what heinous atrocities took place in there, where the 2 urine and feces stained mattresses that when pressed fluid would gush out had once served as beds of continuous pain and suffering for Jeffrey and his sister. There were now proper beds with pillows and warm blankets. They, apparently with their high degree of audacity, had done the makeover ready to welcome back the 3 siblings home. Around the same time as well, Bottineau was back in family court trying to get back Jeffrey's siblings out of foster care and back in her home. However, she and her husband were arrested later that month on March 19, 2003, and charged with second-degree murder and forcible confinement, with the former's charge in relation to Jeffrey's death and the latter's for the locking up of his sister. During their interviews with the investigators, they didn't say anything at all, as they showed no emotion and no remorse when they were shown photos of Jeffrey. On further investigations, revelations of their seemingly dark past records were uncovered. A deed that, if it had been carried out by the Catholic Children's Aid Society, would have ruled them out of being given the responsibility of raising, let alone the Baldwin siblings, but any child at all. A background check on them would have shown them that Elva had a child abuse conviction back in 1970, with her own daughter Eva being the victim. The 5-month-old baby had died of pneumonia in 1969, and on further investigation of Eva's death, it was discovered that she had multiple fractures on her body. It had even made it to the local newspaper as a major story that shocked many at the time, with Elva being sentenced to 1 year of probation. In 1978, Norman was convicted of assaulting 2 of Elva's children from a previous relationship and was given a sentence of 2 years of probation. The 2 children had undergone the same cruel treatment that Jeffrey and his sister experienced before being seized by the same child services that helped the 2 to get custody of the 4 children 2 decades later. One of the children, Fred, shared his experience.
As a child, I can remember being, stuffed into a dog cage. Me and my sister being put into a metal dog bin.
He and his sister were shown nothing but abuse in that house. They, similarly to Jeffrey and his sister, reverted to animal instinct.
It sounds gross, but I have to say it, but when they go to flush the toilet, there's clean water. What we assumed was clean water. The toilet was never, all that clean, to be honest. But you take out what you could with your hand and drink it out of your hand.
Same thing and similar experiences, only 2 decades apart. The same child services agency was also involved and ever present in that apartment. The caseworker for the agency knew they were being beaten and would argue with Elva to get her act together and take care of them, but it ended there, as there was no evidence that the Children's Aid took any action. And according to Fred, the visits made by the caseworker were another excuse for Elva and Norman's thrashings.
And the minute she was gone, the door would unlock, and we get beaten because she'd end up showing up because of us screaming or carrying on.
What led to them being saved was when Fred's sister showed up to school with bruises, forcing the child's aide to act as the children were taken and put up for adoption. As mentioned earlier, Norman was arrested and given the 2-year probation after being fined only $300 when he pleaded guilty. However, he still stayed with the family, which at this point had grown to include their 3 daughters, with the child's aide always monitoring. By the 80s, Elva Bottineau had already been through 2 psychological evaluations, and both of them stated that Elva should not be in care of children, and therefore she shouldn't have been deemed fit to even take care of her daughters. Surprisingly, she was now even sponsored by the child's aide as a daycare giver, as they paid her to even take care of other people's children. This would also lead to them being helped to get custody of the Baldwin siblings, as mentioned earlier. The investigators weren't the only ones surprised with how careless the child's aide was in helping them get the custody. Elva's son, Fred, had some years before Jeffrey's death re-established contact with her, trying to find answers as to why she treated them with such cruelty, only to discover that despite having been allowed to raise 3 more children, she now even had her grandchildren living with her.
She told me she had custody of all 4 kids. I'm like, how did you get custody of all 4 kids?
And you were surprised because...
Because of the fact that she actually got adoption of those kids. After all me and my sister went through, and this lady is still able to keep 3 kids, plus take on the adoption of the other 4 kids. I'm sorry, I don't have the highest grade in high school or the highest education, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. It's like there's something wrong.
That was also the time he saw the state of Jeffrey as well.
His ribs would be all sunken, his arms were really thin and skinny. That triggered an alarm in me. I was like that.
You remember looking like that?
Oh, of course.
So when you saw Jeffrey and you had concerns, did you think maybe I should go to the authorities? Maybe I should go to Children's Aid? Maybe I should warn them about this woman if they don't know?
I thought of it, but at the same point, it was the thing that kept coming back to me was that, look, she's got Children's Aid, knows that they're here. Normally they do their checkups and whatever occasionally, I don't know why they wouldn't have seen something like that happening. Maybe I should have said something or done something, but I didn't.
The court declared they had kept Jeffrey and his sister locked in a bedroom where he lived in his own feces and left them to drink from a toilet. The judge was told that the pair used the children as a source of income, collecting government support checks, while offering little or none in return. 3 years later, on April 7, 2006, they were convicted of second-degree murder by Justice David Watt in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, with the sentencing being delivered on June 9, 2006. Elva Bottineau was sentenced to 22 years in prison, that is until 2028, and Norman Kidman 20 years, that is until 2026, before they respectively become eligible for parole. The Catholic Children's Aid Society claimed to have no previous knowledge of the grandparents' child abuse conviction from the 70s, and they stated that they only learned of this fact in 2002, after Jeffrey had died. There had been, however, a record of the abuse conviction in the Children's Aid Society's own files. For whatever reason, the agency had claimed to have no knowledge about Elva and Norman's child abuse records at the time of the children's placement with them. Perhaps they knew, but they just didn't care, or wouldn't admit for obvious reasons. At the time, the Ministry of Children and Youth Services didn't have a requirement to look into child welfare records when it came to putting children with their extended family. Ontario believed that family preservation meant everything, even if it was detrimental to the child to be placed with certain relatives, as was the case with Jeffrey and his siblings. Michael Davis, a detective investigating the case, told the coroner's counsel that he would have charged every single adult that lived in that home for their negligence. However, the Provincial Child and Family Services Act, while imposing on all citizens the duty to report if they suspect a child is suffering, they couldn't be punished as only professionals such as doctors, nurses, teachers and social workers that may be involved with children can be charged under the Act, and only they are subject to a fine not exceeding $1,000 at the time. As for criminal charges, he said, only those with the duty of care, meaning Bottineau and Kidman, could be charged. The detective, however, wasn't the only witness who thought the witless adults who lived in that house and watched the destruction of that child without lifting a finger to help were responsible in his death. Osiris Villalobos, the after-hours child aids worker who visited the home with the police after leaving the hospital, wept on the witness stand as he remembered the stench of Jeffrey's sad room and how the smell of urine was so strong that it stayed on his clothes. The room, he said, was totally different from the other bedrooms in the small house, where the adults and the favored children lived completely different. He would have also charged them if it were up to him, he added, while wiping his tears. Osiris wasn't involved in the case file and the agency's failure to check the records of Elva and Norman. Jeffrey's paternal grandmother Susan Dimitriadis testified as she stated that all her desperate attempts to see her grandson were ignored by the child's aide, and that if she had gotten the chance, she would have taken him without even caring about the police coming after her. Elva and Norman had made appeals, but in March 3, 2011, the Court of Appeal for Ontario dismissed both of them. Bottineau's lawyer had argued that she wasn't smart enough to realize Jeffrey would die, and Kidman, for some unknown reason, had asked the court to quash his murder conviction and instead sent him to prison for manslaughter. In January 19, 2012, the Supreme Court of Canada decided not to hear any other appeal from Elva. In September 9, 2013, a coroner's inquest into Jeffrey's death was started. The main goal of the inquest was not to place blame on those involved, but to explore the systemic issues that had taken place in relation to Jeffrey's death. The reason why the inquest took place more than a decade after Jeffrey had died was because Elva Bottineau had exhausted all of her appeals the previous year. There have been a great deal of changes in the child welfare system since Jeffrey Baldwin's death, in which the Catholic Children's Aid Society stated that Elva and Norman's horrific child abuse convictions would not go unnoticed if he was to be placed in that home after these changes took place. In February 14, 2014, the coroner's jury ruled the boy's death a homicide and delivered 103 recommendations. The Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies and the Children's Aid Societies both conducted reviews of the recommendations that were directed towards all the Ontario's Children's Aid Societies. These recommendations required the Child Services to do a thorough background check of criminal records and identify the caregiver's identity. The new changes to the child welfare system meant that relatives who became caregivers would be subjected to the same standards as adoptive and foster parents. They would need to go through family history, background, and record checks to ensure that they could provide adequate care in a decent environment and, most importantly, a good home. Despite the fact that he lived a short life, he will still be remembered for his boisterous energy, beautiful smile, and being a lovely boy. A bronze statue of him, dressed as his favorite superhero Superman, was put in Greenwood Park in Toronto to honor his memory, and as a symbol to everyone to show how important it is to be diligent and shed light to child abuse, with a strong reminder that children should get better treatment and, most importantly, to be shown love, the love that unfortunately Jeffrey Baldwin and his sister were not given.